Okay, go ahead, Mr. Beck.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to our May 2020 meeting of the Penns Manor School Board. And at this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Roll call.
Sure. Mr. Belchick? Okay, we will come back. Dr. Boston?
Here.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Here.
Mr. Hardesty?
Here.
Mr. Larch?
Here.
Mr. Polenic? Mr. Polenic?
Here.
Gotcha. Thank you. Mrs. Date?
Here.
Mr. Packer?
Here.
Myself, Mr. Johnston?
Here.
Mrs. Dolges?
Here.
Mrs. Eglin?
Here.
Mr. Grimaldi?
Here.
Mr. Dalton?
Here.
Mr. Gramling?
Here.
And Mr. Belchick? Mr. Belchick, just put your thumb up if you're here. Okay, Mr. Belchick is present.
Okay, thank you. Can we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, thank you. At this time, the board will hear citizens' remarks.
Mr. Gramling, do we have anything in the YouTube comments?
There's nothing in the YouTube comments at this time.
Okay, we're going to move to new business. Can we have a motion to award the bid for unleaded gasoline A7 octane to American Natural Supply for a period of 1 year, 2020 through 2021, at the variable delivered price as follows: 500 to 1,499 gallons delivered at the variable price of 0.138 cents per gallon, adjusted to the OPUS average rack price posting from the Pittsburgh area. 1,500 and up gallons delivered at the variable price of 0.1910 cents per gallon, adjusted to the OPUS average rack price posting for the Pittsburgh area. We have a motion.
Motion.
Thank you. How about a second?
Second.
Was the second Dr. Boston? Thank you.
Is there any discussion on the matter? Roll call.
Mr. Belchick?
Yes. I'm sorry, I got kicked off earlier.
Dr. Boston?
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode?
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mr. Larch?
Yeah.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenic?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Packer.
Okay, 5B under new business, award diesel fuel bid. Can we have a motion to award the bid for ultra-low sulfur diesel fuel to petroleum traders for a period of 1 year, 2020 through 2021, at the variable delivered price as follows: 3,000 to 5,999 gallons delivered at the variable price of 0.0741 cents per gallon, adjusted to the OPUS average rack price posted for the Pittsburgh area. 6,000 and up gallons delivered at the variable price of 0.0366 cents per gallon, adjusted to the Opus average rack price posting for the Pittsburgh area.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Belchick,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Packer,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Packer.
Okay, thank you. Under 5C, award liquid propane bid. And we have a motion to award the bid for liquid propane gas to Feral Gas at the fixed rate for the year 2020-2021 of $1.08 per gallon, and to award the bid for liquid propane gas to Feral Gas at the fixed rate for the year 2021-2022 of $1.10 per gallon, with the understanding that the above stated fixed prices, including the supplying of Feral Gas at the fuel storage tank, fuel dispensing equipment, and related services, as more specifically outlined in the request for bids at no additional cost to the district. Can we have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Belchick,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes.
Mr. Larch,
Abstain.
Mr. Packer,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic, Mr. Polenic,
I believe he's affirming a positive by going thumbs up.
Oh, I didn't see that. Mr.
He
Polenic,
seems frozen. He's frozen on our screen.
okay. Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Packer, how would you like, should I vote not cast for Mr. Polenic? How would you like for me to do this?
Yeah, let's do that. Don, you can follow up with Mr. Sam.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on to 5D, reject all other fuel bids. Can we have a motion to reject all other fuel bids submitted to the district on or before May 2, 2020 for unleaded gasoline, diesel fuel, and liquid propane gas?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Belchick,
Yes.
Dr. Boston,
Yes.
Mrs. Eckenrode,
Yes.
Mr. Hardesty,
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Larch,
Yes.
Mr. Packer,
Yes.
Mr. Polenic,
Yes.
Mrs. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Just a point of order, Mr. Polenic, your vote cast on the award of the liquid propane bid did not come through. How do you vote on that?
Yes.
Thank you. Both motions carry, Mr. Packer.
Okay, thank you. Our next regular scheduled meeting is May 21st at 7 p.m. And then we will have tonight's committee meeting immediately following this meeting. Is there any other business that needs brought before the board? Okay, hearing that this meeting is adjourned. And I think we're gonna just move right into our committee. Mr. Johnson?
Okay. So if you want to take a look, those of you that are board members that have an agenda, if you take a look under programs and program presentations, I would just like to lead into the first item that we have this evening, which is technology capital improvements. If you recall, the situation of school closures over the past 2 months, we were on a journey of continuity of education. If you also recall, districts were to select 2 options, enrichment type program or instruction. So in determining the situation that we were in, we realized the fact of the equipment to make sure that we have contact with every student, that we did not have that. So in looking towards a direction of how to make that span change from doing the enrichment and review that we currently are doing and ending the school year with, the administration clearly knows that should we encounter next school year opening up, not being allowed in the buildings, or even in a situation where we're operating on some type of hybrid plan, meaning that all students would come in on the same day at the same time. We know we have to be planning to the future to make sure that the constant connection with students is going to take place. With that said, we know we certainly have a broadband internet connection problem within our school district. We've communicated with board. Probably also those that are listening out in the public have also realized that the county is also working towards solving that problem in the county. Will that happen like a light switch? Absolutely not. But in turn, on our side here as a district, we have to be ready to come up with the best case scenario of how we can utilize technology to make sure we connect the greatest number of our students in our district. So with that, we have looked our direction towards Mr. Gramling, our Director of Technology, and along with Mr. Muscatel, our Business Manager. So I've asked Mr. Gramling to come up with a program presentation this evening to share with you. And again, I know this is budget time. I know it's difficult time of looking at spending. However, as the superintendent, I have to sit and say, I also have a goal that I have to reach, and that is making sure that if we continue in this situation or some type of hybrid in this situation, that we're able to connect as many students as we can. So with that said, let's let Mr. Gramling go ahead and present. By all means, as we go through, ask him questions, and we can have some discussion after that. So his goal was, first of all, from the administrative team, was to say to him, hey, we need to make sure that our students are connected. Again, we know the internet broadband situation that we have in the community. However, on our side, here in our district, we need to be prepared. So with that said, Mr. Gramling, go ahead.
You're muted, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. To start a plan, it is important to identify where we are currently. Due to the stay-at-home orders where we have been thrust into a distance learning environment, the district has been conducting enrichment and review using Google Classroom as an online option for about 60% of our students, and paper and pencil packets for over 100 other students. In that process, we have lent out over 78 Chromebooks as students have identified a need for device. We have provided 1 device per household as requested. Prior to the closure of the district, we had conducted a study of students in grades 3 through 12. In that study, we were able to identify about 40% of our students lacked internet service or were dependent on cellular-only internet. We have also identified some teachers that are reliant on cellular internet as well. As far as district resources, the district has 570 Chromebooks, a wireless network with an access point in every other classroom, and a 1 gigabit network backbone. As we look to move forward and address the needs of our students, we have identified the position we should be in. It is important for every student to have a device available to them, a network that can handle all the devices on it, and a learning management system that can enable instruction regardless of physical location of the student, the ability for every student to access the internet. That brings us to the challenges we currently have getting to where we need to go. We do not have enough devices for each student to have one assigned to them and available in the case of distance learning. We also have a wireless density issue. When too many devices hitting the same access point creates congestion. A network backbone capacity issue, congestion getting devices back to the internet circuit and server infrastructure. We do not have an official learning management system to enable material distribution that will enable hybrid and distance learning. Teachers are lacking tools to conduct distance learning and preparing lessons for that LMS instruction. In that same study, we concluded that 22% of our students have no device or are using a phone at home to access their materials. But quickly we found out that that number, even though it represents 3/4 of our students having a device, we found that number to be deceitful. Those students have access to devices at home where guardians and students are now thrust at home together. This allowed those devices that were available to be split among that family unit, creating a lack of those devices at home. The district already has 570 devices in inventory, and the purchase of 265 more devices would equip every student with a device. This will allow a mixture of students to every student having the ability to have a device at home based on the learning environment required. To plan for the inevitable forgotten or uncharged Chromebook, this plan calls for a replacement of 30 aged Chromebooks that will then be used as a lending library that we can hand out as needed. The next challenge we have is the wireless density issue. The map to the left represents the current access points in the district. And although we have appropriate coverage, we lack the ability to support device density, where the amount of devices in an area will overwhelm the access point's ability to serve those devices. We also know that regardless what broadband initiative the district pushes, there will remain areas of the district without access to high-speed internet. In response to the loss of building access to students, many districts turn to wireless access in their parking lots, and this is what we are proposing as well. The resolution to our wireless density issue is to do the following. Replace the existing access points in large areas like gyms and auditorium. The proposed access points have more radios and allow more devices to connect. Those devices would be the 12 Meraki MR53Es. Adding 24 MR36 access points to the classroom, 6 in the high school and 18 in the elementary, would help us carry over that density issue that we have when too many students are in classrooms that are together, creating that congestion on the network. Adding 7 MR84s, which are an outdoor rated access point, will be mounted on the outside of the building to bring our wireless into the parking lots. That brings us to the network capacity issue. I have included this slide as a demonstration of how the network has changed as we have added more wireless devices and moved away from wired devices. Most switches have 48 ports with an uplink back to the central network. Currently, that uplink is 1 gigabit. In a wired network, each device has a port on that switch, meaning you have 48 devices sharing that one uplink. In a wireless network, each port is connected to an access point, and then each access point can have 50 devices connecting to it. To mean you theoretically could have 2,400 devices sharing that one uplink port. To address that uplink capacity, I am calling to increase the uplink capacity 10 times to a 10 gigabit connection. This requires a replacement of some 2,000 feet of fiber optic cable, as the current fiber is too long to handle the increased speeds. This will also require the replacement of 2 fiber core switches and 5 branch switches. The plan is to reuse 3 of those switches, 3 of the 7 replaced, to facilitate the network upgrade in other locations. In looking to have a uniform experience for our teachers and students alike, we have identified the need for a learning management system. This system would allow for distance learning, hybrid learning, and housing material and instructions for in-building education. We have formed a committee of 9 members that will evaluate and select a system for the district. The committee is made up of teachers from both buildings, as well as 3 administrators. As the committee has met, the need to evaluate and select teaching tools or plugins was identified and is also being undertaken by the committee. These will be tools that will work with the chosen LMS while adding value in the subject areas. With moving in this direction, we need to evaluate, do our teachers currently have the tools to conduct lessons in a hybrid or distance environment? In looking in that direction, we have identified 2 tools to make our teachers the most effective. Webcams will allow our teachers to broadcast or record lessons to conduct classes in the LMS. Screencastify is another tool that our teachers are currently using, and this allows teachers to record their screens and videos to uplink to their classroom. Screencastify is currently free during the pandemic, but is expected to be a charged service for the next school year. We are also looking to create a social media for the district. The goal there is to meet our parents and students where they are and keep them informed while driving them back to our website for the most up-to-date information. This brings us to the cost. To purchase the 265 Chromebooks, we are looking at a cost of $70,395. To purchase the access points needed to correct the wireless density issue, the cost would be $40,114.72. To purchase the switches and fiber optic cable needed to make that change, we are looking at a cost of $40,253 and a penny. And to purchase the webcams for every teacher and Screencastify for the district, we are looking at a cost of $6,435.20. Currently, we are not proposing a cost for an LMS system, as 2 of the 3 that the committee is currently evaluating are free. or already included in services that the district is already using. That brings us up a total cost of $157,197.93. To fund this proposal, we are proposing a capital reserve expense of $150,762.73. $6,435.20, which would be the teacher tools, would be paid for out of the IT supply budget from 2019-2020 school year. For a repayment of the capital reserve in year one, we are looking at a refund from a 2005 E-rate appeal. And E-rate is a federal program that is paid for using a fee on phone bills and cell phone bills, which the district is allocated money to be used for category 2, which is internal networking equipment. In 2005, the district conducted a project that they had to fund instead of being reimbursed through E-rate. The district at that time appealed that process. That appeal has been approved, and the district is looking at a refund of that money, which is $55,659.84. As part of this process and putting together this plan, we conducted a PEPM mini bid through the E-rate program, which is similar to that appeal. It is that same process with that appeal, but we had time because of the pandemic to conduct this mini bid. We are looking at a reimbursement on that bid of $27,293. That would be the year one repayment to the capital reserve. And then years 2 through 5 would be a deduction from the technology supply account of $18,600. Thank you, and I could take any questions you might have.
So Dave, let me just make a comment, and then anyone, if you have questions, certainly feel free to ask. So it is our recommendation as administration in order to make sure that we can pick up at any time to do either doing instruction, either in a situation where we're fully closed, our buildings, or in a situation where we're in a hybrid model, meaning that we bring half the students in on certain days, the other half on the other, we would be equipped to do that. So it is our recommendation to move forward with this plan. I would ask you to consider it to be approved next week in order for us to make sure that we have it fully implemented and everything here for us to start up beginning in August. Your question, let me just answer this question because it surfaced to us, is that, okay, what if we open up and everybody can come back in August? Trust me, believe me, there's not one administrator that wants that to happen. However, I just don't want to be in a situation in the future that we don't have our students equipped. And in addition to that, we have, needs to be our goal that every teacher and every student becomes understanding that this is the method and the way of the future, and anything that they go to do, they're going to have to use this technology. So it is our recommendation for you as a board to consider approving next week. And by all means, if you have any questions for me, Mr. Gramling, or any other administrator, ask away.
Is this something, I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. Is this something that we could use some of the money from the CARES?
Josh, did you want to interject, or do you want me to answer first?
Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
We could tag it with that. However, I will just tell you, and I'll let Josh also explain to you. I have to be open and honest with you. We're going into a year of the unknown. That's number one. Number two, I know as superintendent, we've got to get ourselves positioned that we have to have this equipment and be ready. I mean, there's just no question. Otherwise, we will continue to do what we're doing right now, which, okay, it filled our gap, so to speak, and we have been communicating with students. Is it the ideal situation? Absolutely not. So to your question of can it come out of CARES funds? It can. However, if you look at our total budget that we will talk about later here in the agenda, and knowing the amount of deficit unknowns that we have just because of the situation we're all in, we're asking to borrow from the capital reserve and pay it back because if you know that this is that we can't take out of capital reserve for all kinds of things. So to be quite honest, I'm going to be honest with you. I look at it as we're borrowing from ourselves to get us through this lump in the road, so to speak. By all means, I certainly don't want to advise that we're outspending capital reserve right and left. However, knowing an educational need right now, and then just in my opinion, the lack of describing it, borrowing from ourselves and paying it back, I felt that that was our best recommendation to give to you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston.
Mr. Johnston, John Hardesty, if we had this technology, the Chromebooks and everything, would we be handling what we're doing right now differently? Would we be out of the paper packs? Would we be teaching not in the review, but in the other way?
Well, we still have the problem of internet connection, which we are trying to communicate with the county to alleviate that. I still can't say that we'll have 100% connection even with any plan that the county implements. So that's why in the presentation that Mr. Gramling gave you was the situation of us providing that strong internet feed to parking lots in our district. So will it alleviate packets? Absolutely. Is it still the perfect situation? No. We've talked about, and Mr. Gramling can probably even, he also reminds us as an administrative team that, we probably could load work for those students that have internet, don't have internet at home. We could even use thumb drives to load work on. They could still take the Chromebook home, but the materials would be within the thumb drive. And Mr. Gramling, I don't know if there's anything more detailed that you wanted to add to that, because he reminds us as administrators on the team that, that could be a solution.
Yeah, that is definitely a solution. During a meeting today that I had, there is also another solution, which is a caching device that could potentially be sent home with students that would cache the materials that they would need. It would sort of act like a pseudo internet for all the information that you preload onto it. I expect to have a demo of that in a few days, but having a device at home would definitely facilitate the learning environment that we have currently. Whether we'd be able to move to instructions, that would definitely be a curriculum decision.
Mr. Muscatello, is this the same type of program using the capital reserve as we did on the roof and the gas line? Is that basically it? We pay it forward and then you've come up with a income stream or identified an income stream to pay back capital reserve? Is that the idea, sir?
Yes, that is correct. It's obviously a lot cheaper to, for lack of a better word, borrow from ourselves than it is to go out and have money lent to us at an interest rate that will cost us something. So yes, if we can afford it, certainly want to go this direction. And in talking with Dave, and we've done a 5-year payback on other things, including the roof, including the gas line. So a 5-year payment worked out okay. And in this particular situation, Mr. Gramling did mention to you that the year one payment is being handled by actually the E-rate program. So that's actually helpful in kicking back that money pretty quickly, and then spreading out the remaining payments over the additional 4 years. Just one other quick thing too, just to piggyback on the internet conversation, just to let you know, internet is definitely a huge issue, not only in our district, but in many parts of Indiana County. If you do have a chance to talk to either the commissioners or other elected officials in this county, it is an issue. Specifically in our district, one of the things, or a couple of things that we've been tossing around as ideas and how to solve that. Obviously, we talked tonight about putting internet, our wireless access points on the outsides of our building so that there is access to the internet in our parking lots. But I think the other thing to keep in mind is that we've also talked about approaching our local businesses to put access points, share their internet, put access points in their businesses. We've talked about putting access points in our school buses. We've talked about putting access points in many places throughout the district. And so it would, one thing that stops us every time we do that is that even still, many of the businesses and many of the areas in our district lack internet connectivity altogether. And so until we can get that expansion in our area and many other areas of the county, it will be very restrictive in how we can deliver online learning to those students with homes that don't have internet.
Is there any other grants out there we could take advantage of? Is there any grants? I mean, surely for a small school like ours in a rural area, there has to be grants to buy equipment.
Sure. So obviously we talked about the Federal CARES Act money. This is a qualified expenditure under that. You know, the other thing to think about is that in terms of the broadband expansion in Indiana County, they have, as I understand it, applied for $1.5 million in grants with a matching $1.5 million to total $3 million in broadband expansion across the county. I'm not involved in the project, but what I can tell you is that they are targeting very rural areas of the county. And a survey has gone out to 4 separate school districts, actually, I think to all school districts in Indiana County, to determine the areas of greatest need in terms of lack of reliable high-speed broadband. What we're finding, and it's no surprise, is that a majority of those areas, the largest parts of those areas are in Penns Manor, Marion Center, United, and Purchase Line school districts. And so I know that the county has a concerted effort to expand broadband, including broadband in our specific area to provide internet access to students that just don't have anything anywhere near them. So there are some dollars out there. In terms of specific dollars, grant dollars for our school district, we are not aware of anything to buy equipment like this. I will tell you that they're part of this, part of one of the state pieces of legislation, there was a grant created, and I don't recall the total amount of that grant, Mr. Johnston, but we applied for that grant. We did not get that grant in any way, shape, or form, not even a partial funding of that grant. And I think, Mr. Johnston, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think only one school district in Indiana County received that money?
No one in Indiana County received the money. Paula Ridge in the IU was the only school district in the IU that I'm aware that obtained those grant funds. And I will tell you that the over half of the amount that you see there in the presentation is the exact amount that was presented in that grant. And unfortunately, no one in the county was selected or awarded any money. Other questions?
Josh, you said you found an income stream to pay this money back. That kind of confuses me when we saw the budget.
Yeah. Let
There
me
is
just
no money.
Yeah, that's true.
So why are we spending more? I mean, it's always good to upgrade, but at this point in time and all the unknowns that we have, why are we going to put ourselves more in debt? Even if we are borrowing from ourselves, we
Sure.
still want to pay it back. It's still going to come out of our general fund. And as you showed us, there isn't any money in our general fund.
So it's important to keep in mind that first and foremost, we have a duty to make sure that we can provide a fair and appropriate education to all of our students. And one thing that stands in our way of doing that is making sure that all of our students have access to a device that has access to the content, that has access to their teachers, both inside the building and outside the building. So when we're talking about funding a project like this, one creative way that we can do that is by purchasing the entire sum of devices out of our capital reserve and using our general fund. And this is not a proposal to increase general fund spending in the technology budget. This is actually a reduction in spending in the technology budget because it will be transferred from his budget directly back into the capital reserve over the course of the next 5 years to pay essentially back ourselves. And really, that's a cost savings to the district, not a cost to the district. Because otherwise, if we were, and this is definitely a great need for us, which is to get this technology upgraded. Otherwise, if we did not have that funding in our capital reserve, we would be looking at ways to lease or long-term finance, which is a cost. So I think we're very fortunate in the fact that we're able to do something like this, which helps to lower our cost to do projects like this. Plus, we are utilizing those federal E-rate dollars to offset significantly more than half of the cost of this project. So we're really getting the best bang for our buck for this particular project, which is greatly needed.
Other questions, comments on this one?
I have one comment, or I guess it's a question. If, God forbid, this virus situation we're in extends into the fall, then am I not correct that we are going to need those extra Chromebooks if we want our quality of education to remain?
Yes, you're correct. So the reason that we're proposing this project is that we are in a time frame now that we're using enrichment review. So in order to move to instruction, which I would have to go back and say that as superintendent, I made the decision for us to continue with enrichment review at this time, simply based on the fact of the equity across the district of providing technology and connection to students. So yes, I'm saying in order for us to move to instructional days, which let me explain what that means, is that beginning in August, and it is not easy, but our administrative group knows we have no choice. We can no longer, if we're closed, or even if we come back for 2 weeks and we have closure, or even if we open up and we only have half the students in at a time, we have to move to instructional days. And if we don't move to instructional days, I'm just fearing what that results in. Someone will go to where they can get their instructional days. So is it something that I want to go and spend a lot of capital reserve funds? Absolutely not. So trust me, we had hours of talking each day. What is, and I tell them all the time, what is the most conservative way to get anything done? And so to get the instructional piece to happen, we have to put the device in every single student. Just for example, if you would have asked any student or teacher on Friday, March 13th, if we would be in this situation, absolutely no one would have told you that. And that could happen to us again. So knowing that can happen, I would think that you would want us to expect us to be ready. And I know, I'm sure you as board members were not saying, oh yeah, Ray, Darren, you decided to do enrichment and review for the extended school year. But I could not see putting the requirements in of attendance every day, doing it the accurate way. I mean, you could say that you're doing attendance, but in order to make that happen, we've got to be connected with students every day. Teachers have to be live with students every day. And that's instruction. And that's the same instruction that happens under this roof. We've got to provide on the outside now because of this unfortunate situation and anything that else that's going to come up. And I will continue to say, as a school district and as a superintendent, if we did this one time that we've already closed our state for this situation, I am quite sure that we'll get into the future where if a situation like this happens again, we'll be very much more easier to want to close things than we did this time. And I want to be prepared. And honestly, I'm going to just be perfectly honest with you. I felt a little bit embarrassed to say that I've got to continue our school year in this way. And I will take the responsibility of that in saying that I should have presented this to you back in August and saying, but I will also tell you that in past years, there's going to be a couple other items that come up on the agenda. In the past years, I've wanted it to be under the roof. I wanted everything to happen, and I still want it to happen. But if we get this large hurdle thrown in front of us every time, I can't keep disrupting a kid's education every single day like this. So it's equipment, it's a connection of us getting on with the school year, whether the government says you can't open or not. We know as administration, we have to start on the first day of school. And in order to do that, we need that, what has been presented by Mr. Gramlin.
Thank you, Darren.
Other questions? Okay. So we will have that on the agenda for next week for your approval or disapproval. So that will be on next week's agenda. Next, going down the agenda, negotiations. We do have an item on there. I'm going to reserve that for executive session since that has to do with personnel and also a contract. Next, going to number 4 on your agenda, curriculum. You'll see listed there for you next week to approve our list of 2020 graduates. And also that is an attachment online for you to see the graduates is presented in front of you for the 2020 school year of 69 students that are listed there. Next, moving to letter B, 4B, and here's another, and Mr. Belchick, I'll just say this to you. You probably would have thought that you would never hear this out of my mouth. So let me talk about what's listed on 4B. Requesting next week that the board would approve our submission to PDE to allow us to have flexible instruction days. And that application, just so that you're aware, would provide us the opportunity to have 5 days in which we could use flexible instruction. Again, how do you make that happen? Just exactly the materials that Mr. Gramling presented to us, that we would have to make that connection. So I'm not sitting here saying for us to change our next school year's calendar. We certainly have snow days in there, but allowing us to submit as a school district to ask for instructional flex days, this is what it consists of. First, a district can ask for up to 5 of those types of days. That gives administration in a school district the flux, so that if some odd situation comes up, maybe something devastating happens in a particular building, we can go on with 5 days with our authority from PDE to go ahead and continue with education for 5 days. You're probably sitting there saying, well, Darren, okay, the maximum is 5 days that you can ask for when we just went through this situation that we've gone through. You're exactly right. However, the requirements are still in place that we can only ask for 5. So as the superintendent is sitting and looking at the situation we've gone through and things that could come in the future, I'm biting my tongue and asking your request for allow us to submit for the flexible instruction days, just so we have those in our back pocket, so to speak. Still, I want as much education to go on under our roof as anyone else. And we did approve a calendar that has snow days in it. I would allow us to still operate that way, but we would still have then, by applying to these and being given permission, we would still have 5 additional days that we could use, that we could go on with instruction and not have school buildings open. So again, if you approve that next week on the agenda for us to submit, that would give us 5 days each school year for the next 3. That's how it works. So you're applying for 3 consistent years, and that would be the maximum we can ask for is 5. So I don't know if there's any questions, comments.
Mr. Johnston, have I heard read in the paper perhaps, or that some other school districts throughout the whole Western PA are talking about every other day school, or, in class and then electronic? Is that a?
Sure. So let me give them a little explanation to that. We as administrative group have already been talking about what are we going to do in different scenarios. So one of the situations, of course, could be that we're not in the green and can't open. However, if we aren't in the green with the materials that Mr. Gramling went over, and also working with our teachers, that we want to be prepared to open that form and fashion. However, we could be in a situation even where we're asked to open our schools, meaning that we have stipulation that we can only have so many students in a particular classroom. We can only have so many students in a particular cafeteria. So we as administrative group talked about all kinds of scenarios. And again, I'm just going to rattle off a couple situations that can take place. I know there's public listening, so please do not take it as this is what we're going to do. But yes, absolutely. We've had discussions, and you've heard from many other districts as we're planning for August. Should we have a hybrid situation? Let me explain hybrid. What I mean by hybrid is that we bring students into the building certain days and have students home with devices the other days. And again, why are we doing that? Just absolutely trying to follow any type of social distancing requirements that we might be given, meaning that, okay, you can open up your school building. However, the maximum amount of students is you can only have 50% of your population, or maybe it becomes a situation where there can only be 12 students in a classroom. And in those cases, we've had discussions of alternating days, meaning that every other day. So we take half of our student population comes in on a Monday, and then the second half comes in on Tuesday. Again, we're back with the first group on Wednesday. That's one option. Another option that we have talked about is doing one group on Monday and Wednesday, another group on Tuesday and Thursday, leaving our Fridays for students that have problems connecting to the internet to be able to come in on Fridays. So again, none of those are ideal situations, but we have had discussions, and those flexible days would, in my opinion, give us more of our own individual authority, meaning that those will be all regulated by PDE for the guidance of what we can, if we can open up fully or if we open up under a hybrid. But 5 flex days that we would be applying for would be very similar to the hybrid model. However, it already identifies to the community, identifies to us as administration, and also to PDE. The Penn's Manor has the opportunity to have 5 days should they encounter any type of situation that we would encounter that could have students in the building, that we could have instruction going on at least up to 5 days outside their buildings.
Thank you, sir.
Other questions? Okay, if not, we'll move down through the agenda. 4C, CAMCO agreement. You have that for your review. And again, it's to provide occupational and physical therapy to students in need that's in the district. If you want to take a look and read through it, the cost is pointed out in part 4 of that agreement, which is $62 per hour for contracted services. And again, that's for any student that needs occupational or physical therapy here in our district. Questions on that one? Okay, if not, we'll move on to budget and finance. 5A, renew Pearson work sampling license for 2021. Again, what that is a service that's used by our pre-K program here that we use each year. So we're just asking for the renewal of it. Number 5B, the 2021 proposed budget. And again, let me just say before I turn it over to Mr. Muscatella that you're listening out in the community. It's probably one of the most difficult times for school districts to prepare a budget. I just want to preface by saying that this would be a budget that we have not seen in a long time with the deficit that Mr. Muscatello will present. However, a lot of it is due to the uncertainties that's going on. So I will turn it over to Mr. Muscatello, and as he's getting connected, I just want to say this is that all districts across the state are encountering what you're about to see in a budget, and we will certainly get through it, as we've been telling everyone on any situation that we're dealing with, but I'll turn it over to you, Josh, so that you can talk numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. So let me just start here at the beginning and just say, first of all, what we're really talking about here and what we're going to talk about today with these numbers, we're going to compare the 2019-2020 budgets, 2020 budget that we talked about last May in June with the numbers for next fiscal year. And let me just change one thing here. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. Sorry, there's definitely something going on with the screen here. Okay, thank you for that. I apologize. So just a couple of notes on this budget. The first is the comparisons that I'm making today are the 2019-20 budget compared to the 2020-21 budget. The Budget and Finance Committee in the beginning of March, before all of this happened, before the layoffs, before the closures of the school districts, I presented a budget of $96,000, which did include at that time proposed increase to the property tax levy up to the equitable index. At that time, shortly after that meeting, I did present this budget to the whole board. Since then, many things have changed. So since then, the budget has been revised multiple times and is now requiring full board approval here in this month for the proposed budget, and then in June for the final budget. I am projecting for general fund revenues, an overall reduction of 18.67%. And this is entirely due to the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the significant unemployment that we've seen, not just in our area, but across the country. We've been made aware not to expect any increases in the basic education and the special education subsidies, and that we've been told that the state budget is starting out at a $4 to $5 billion deficit. So they have quite a bit of their budget issue is just about as bad as ours is. So from a federal revenue perspective, we're not looking at any new funding. And all the rest of the programs have been level funded. So when we look at property taxes, we have to kind of cue in on both current and delinquent taxes. So what we're projecting here is a significant reduction in current year collections and a lag in delinquent collections. Historically, the district has seen anywhere between a 90 and 92% collection rate in its current property taxes, leaving somewhere between 8 and 10% to be collected in delinquency. We're seeing a huge shift in current property tax, at least for my proposed budget, from a 91.5% property tax collection rate last year, or excuse me, this year in this current fiscal year, to an 80% reduction, to an 80% collection rate in current property taxes in the 2020-21 proposed budget. This leads to a $644,368 reduction in property taxes, both current and delinquent. We see the same pattern in the per capita tax. And I want to note that those two reductions in the budget are what I'll call deferred revenue, meaning that we will collect it at some point, whether it be through a sheriff's sale after a 3-year period. A homeowner does not pay their property taxes. They go through the process, and eventually, if the property is sold either through a sheriff's sale or a person-to-person transaction, the property taxes are paid. The delinquent property taxes are paid upon the transfer of that property. So those funds will come eventually. But the next three are projections of totally lost revenue. The first is the earned income tax of $247,500, and this is entirely due to the large unemployment numbers, the high unemployment numbers that we're seeing as earned income tax is assessed on the payroll tax or the payroll earned by an employee. So real estate transfer tax, that's just a function of fewer homes being transferred. And interest on investments, that's simply just a function of the interest rates have tanked. At one point, we were getting close to 2% on a, not all that long ago, we were getting just 2% on many of our investments. Now we're getting less than 80 basis points on many of those. So that's a tough pill to swallow. So just looking at this, gross deferred revenue of the reductions, the gross deferred revenue is about 660,000, and projected revenue completely lost as a result of this pandemic, approximately 330,000. As I stated a moment ago, we are looking at level funding for both basic education and special education subsidy. However, this budget does account for some small increases in other subsidies that are formula-based. For example, our reimbursement for our contributions to the pension system, our spending on the Social Security and Medicare tax, as well as transportation subsidies. For now, we're generally expecting federal revenues to be largely unaffected. We haven't heard otherwise, so we are pretty much level funding those programs. Where we might see a decrease is in access payments for services provided to access eligible students. And we've seen a drop in that this year, primarily because we can't provide those services in our school building. And so if school is irregular next year, whether it's because we are out of the building or we're not seeing students often enough, then that revenue stream may be affected. But I do want to bring to your attention that there has been an announcement by the state that the application for the federal CARES dollars is available, and the school districts have begun to fill those applications out. The applications are somewhat lengthy, but the restrictions on what you can spend the money on have been loosened. So we have some flexibility there, and this may help. We do expect to collect a fairly large sum, March, April, May, and June payments in June, and the July, August, September, October, November, and December payments, and January and February in the next fiscal year. So when we look at revenues, revenues have been severely affected by this closure and by the large unemployment rate. And if we just look at what we budgeted in 1920 to what we're projecting to budget this year, our overall decrease in revenues is north of 4%, with the lion's share of that being from local revenues, nearly 19%. And as I mentioned earlier, just so you know, those revenues, some of those revenues aren't lost forever. It's just that the lag in collecting them may be 2, 3, 4, 5 years out. And those deferred revenues represent $660,000, and the projection for lost revenues almost $330,000. So looking at general fund expenditures, the general fund expenditures year over year, the total expenditure increase is 1.42%, one of the lowest increases in general fund expenditures that we've seen in a very long time. That increase is very low. They are pretty much attributable to contractually obligated increases in salaries, contractually obligated increases in benefits, and small increases in contracted services that the district utilizes. So what we're looking at is a $253,681 increase over the 2019-2020 budget, and just north of $18 million. So we'll first take a look at the 2019-2020 projected ending. And so what I'm looking at originally was $96 or so thousand this year. And so we're looking still at a deficit. We have originally projected a deficit of about 96,000. I'm projecting now, my revised projections put that at closer to $160,000 loss. I just want to point out to you that this does not include the Federal CARES Act dollars, as we've been told multiple times that it's one-time emergency funding, and we want to be very cautious how we utilize that funding. When we look at the budget summary for the 2021 proposed budget that's before you today, we see that expenditures exceed revenues by nearly 1.12 million. And if we did nothing to address that, we would project using $1.12 million of our fund balance. So I'm going to stop there and ask if anyone has any questions regarding the 2020-21 budget, and just see if you have any comments on the direction we may take, and throw it back to Mr. Packer and Mr. Johnston.
I just want to point out, Mr. Muscatello, is that anybody listening in the community, a couple of situations that I want to make sure that if you're listening in the community and understand, Budget and Finance Committee and the board has seen a budget back in February or so that we only had a deficit around 96,000 to present to be approved here in May. Of course, the situation, as Mr. Muscatello has described to you, has certainly flipped us end over end, for lack of better terminology for it, and has sent us into a spin. So the numbers, if this is the first time you're ever watching us present a budget, this is not a typical budget with this much deficit in it. So I will tell you that the Budget and Finance Committee of the board has been meeting every Thursday evening with administration to talk about what we can do to make sure that we look at every corner, everything that we can do to alleviate the deficit that is there. So if you're seeing this for the first time, again, as a community person, please know that we're working on it. And we do know that we're going to have at least a year of lumpiness, so to speak, because everything has been put in front of us, just because of the revenue lacks that Mr. Muscatello described to you. So again, if you're someone in the community, I just don't want you to have a complete shock and think this is the way that every budget is presented to the full board, and to know that the Budget and Finance Committee of the board has been meeting weekly to have discussions, and will continue to do that, looking at this budget. Again, as Mr. Muscatello described to you, we'll need to approve a preliminary proposed budget next week at our voting meeting, and then a final one will need to be approved before June 30th of this fiscal year. And again, if there's other board members that want to comment or question, I'll certainly give you the opportunity to do that before we move on to the next agenda item. Okay, seeing no comments or questions, let's go ahead and move on to Budget and Finance. Letter C, for that in front of you from David Lindahl, is applying for new home construction tax abatement. And again, that's real estate tax exemption request. And again, if anybody in the community, if you ever go to build a new home construction in our district, please make sure that, that you go through the process as Mr. Lindahl is, to alleviate real estate taxes for 2 years. Next on the agenda, 5D, renew career cruising. That's actually changing. You see that there's a quote. It's actually changing over to Zello. So you'll see at the top a Zello quote. And that is software that's used by our guidance counselors with all of our students in developing career exploration and career planning, actually clear through from the elementary school now through to graduation. So that quote for you to approve that we've been doing each year for a motion next week is to approve $1,800. Questions or comments on that one? None, we'll move to the next letter E, renew Harris School Solutions for 2020-21. Again, that's an attachment as of 5E for you to take a look at for the total cost of $12,786.67. And again, that's all the budget, software, and payroll, etc. So it's basically the software of our business office. Questions, comments? Seeing none, we'll proceed to buildings and grounds. 6A, we're asking you to approve, and again, these are all projects that we typically, these are projects like this that we're asking you to approve A through E that we've been doing over the past few summers. So we're just asking for your approval. And again, I'll go through them, and Mr. Dalton, if there's anything that you want to add when I get through them all, certainly please add them. And if anyone has questions, go right ahead and ask. So the first one is A, to contract with CNL installers to replace stair treads, 10 of them, and to install commercial carpeting at the entrance at the high school. That entrance is the entrance that comes through the hallway in between our ag shop and our industrial arts classroom. So if you're coming in from the fitness center in through the double doors, the landing that we're talking about would be the landing so you can get the doors. And then there's two sets of steps, one to get up to the level where our classrooms are. The next level is to get up to the level of where the gymnasium is. So again, that is going to be on the agenda for 6A for next week. And the total cost of that project will be $6,755. Next, letter B, to contract with TNT Excavating to perform ditching in 2 locations. Those 2 locations would be ditching. We're running into a situation where we see that water is ponding out on the new track surface that we just replaced. That area is if you're at the football field and you're sitting in the section of bleachers where the band sits, there's a section there that is puddling with water, and we certainly don't want our new track surface being damaged. So that's one location of the ditching. The other location of ditching would be at our pre-K and K playground area out back of the school towards the woods. The whole area out around that playground is becoming a swamp, for lack of a better description. So we need to drain water out of there so that it isn't becoming a swamp before we get into the actual playground area. So again, that's 6B. 6C is to contract with Perry driveway sealing for the driveway area. And you can take a look at that particular letter. Total cost would be $7,500. And we've been using actually Perry driving. We've been on a rotating basis every summer. We're doing a section of our parking lot. This would include the circle area, student parking lot, and district office areas for this summer. And also there's patchwork that needs to be done in the student parking lot. Next, D, under buildings and grounds, contract with Tom Talmadge to paint areas in the district. You can see that quote as attachment 6D. Areas, we still have some areas at the high school on the exterior that we need to paint, and now also some areas at the elementary school. So the total cost will be $9,950. Next, to contract with CNL installers to replace carpeting at the elementary entrance for a total of $3,368. And again, that's the area in between the first set of doors and second set of doors in the elementary lobby. If you have been in there lately or come in, you will see that the carpeting is actually starting to lift inside the first set of doors. And actually, that carpeting would have been put in 2004. So because it's lifting, we need to replace that. So those are the items under buildings and ground. I don't know if there's any questions or if Mr. Dalton has anything you want to add that I didn't give enough detail. You're welcome to comment too. Questions, comments? I would ask this. I know we have listed on the agenda the budget those would come out of. We have had discussions, and again, just asking for your comments. If you would like it to leave the costs that are listed there in this budget years that they will come out of, or again, I'm just looking again borrowing from ourselves. It's a situation where we can take these funds that is not in capital reserve to move forward on the budget presentation that Mr. Muscatello talked about and use capital reserves instead of what's listed. Do that switch. So I would need to hear from you. Otherwise, if you don't have any comments or want it out of capital reserve, we would have the payments come out as listed on the agenda. Comments or questions to that? Thoughts?
I think I'd leave that up to Josh as to what his recommendation would be.
Mr. Muscatello, your thoughts?
Yeah, so my recommendation would be to leave it like it is.
Okay. Okay, so we will do that for next agenda. They'll appear for motions as listed. Next, there's nothing currently under athletics, nothing under transportation, nothing under public relations policies, correspondence. So let's move down to new business. 12A, we do have a request for a summer salary to be paid. And so those of you that are in the public, just to give some explanation to that. So if someone from the professional staff wants their full payment to be paid in salary when they leave for the school year, instead of through the summer, they can make that request. And at this point, we do have one request. Questions or comments on that from anyone? Okay. Next, 12B, professional staff retirement. We do have a letter of retirement submitted that will be on the agenda for next week. So we'll talk about that in the executive session. Next, number 12, again, just listing the items that will appear under new business that Mr. Gramling has presented in his presentation, all those items, so there'll be motions for that listed on next agenda. Questions, comments? Okay. And is there any question or comments as for the final opening or before we close today's committee meeting? If not, I do want to say that we do need to have an executive session following this. And again, those in the public, executive session is for board, and the items that will be discussed tonight is personnel related. And again, we will not be having a meeting afterwards for any type of business.
Okay, is there anything else for tonight's meeting? Okay, thank you, folks. And if you would just stay with us for the executive